Mutation is an alteration in an organism's genetic makeup or DNA sequence. Some mutations can occur on our X and Y sex chromosomes. A specific mutation that happens on these chromosomes are X-linked dominant inheritance. These mutations influence the future inheritance patterns when reproducing. The gene mutations can affect the children who are now carriers, which they pass down. This cycle continues with the mutation. There are multiple different ways that this can occur, but for this example, our female has a dominant mutation. This is represented on the first X chromosome for the female, or the capital XH. Our first offspring is a female. The first X chromosome has been inherited from the mother. This dominant chromosome means that the female has inherited the purple dot syndrome from the mother. Our second offspring is a male. Since the male has inherited the mother's X dominant chromosome, the male has the purple dot syndrome. Our third offspring is a female. Since the daughter has inherited the second X chromosome from the mother, also known as the X lowercase h, it does not have the purple dot syndrome. Our last offspring is a male and has inherited the mother's second chromosome, so he does not have the purple dot syndrome. Another example of mutation inheritance is X-linked recessive. This is shown in the mother's second X chromosome, which is represented by the lowercase h. The first offspring is female. Her mother's first X chromosome was used, so she does not have the purple dot syndrome because there is not an X lowercase h chromosome. The second offspring is female. The second X lowercase h chromosome was inherited by the mother. This means that the female is a carrier of the mutation. Since she doesn't have two of the recessive chromosomes, she does not have the purple dot syndrome. The third offspring is male. He has inherited the first X chromosome from the mother. This means he has no recessive chromosomes, which indicates he has no purple dot syndrome. The last offspring is male. He has inherited the recessive X chromosome, which means he has the purple dot syndrome. Since males don't have two X chromosomes, they just need one of the recessive chromosomes to inherit the syndrome. Genetic drift is a random process where allele frequencies change over time due to the factors like natural disasters or chance. Over time, there is a loss of genetic diversity of the population because of the deaths and smaller population size. Some examples are the bottleneck effect and founder effect. The bottleneck effect is a process where a natural disaster causes a big population reduction. The initial population has a lot of genetic diversity and allele frequency. In this situation, there are blue, red, and green birds. In this example, a forest fire occurs, which is a natural disaster, where some of the birds die off. In the original population, there were 12 red birds. After the forest fire, there were 7. There was initially 15 blue birds and now 8. There was initially 11 green birds and now 5. The new population will reproduce. The new population now differs in allele frequencies. You can see that there has been a loss of genetic diversity. The founder effect is an example of genetic drift where a small population relocates from its original population and establishes a new population where genetic diversity, including allele frequency, is different from the original population. The original population is composed of many fish that range in size and color. There is a change in the river course where some of the fish follow into a new lake. Now there's a new population of fish with different allele frequencies than the original. The fish color ratio has changed and genetic diversity has been lost. When we think about natural selection, we often refer to the term survival of the fittest. This is known as the organism that is the fastest, strongest, and smartest that survives to reproduce. But is this the best description of what happens? Survival of the good enough is a more accurate way to describe what occurs. This term refers to an organism meeting the minimum requirements to survive and reproduce. I believe this is a better term to follow because it is more realistic. Organisms might not be counted as their species' biggest, fastest, or strongest, but they have adapted well enough to survive. Penguins have waterproof feathers that help insulate thermal heat from the cold weather or winter. Penguins with multiple layers of feathers on the left are advantageous because it helps with their warmth more easily. Penguins with a couple of layers still can insulate their body heat, just not as well as the penguins with multiple layers, pictured in the middle. Penguins with 1 to no layers of feathers are at a complete disadvantage because the layer itself is not enough to keep them warm. This eventually kills off the penguins with 1 to no layers of feathers. Although the penguins with a couple of feathers aren't the fittest, they are just good enough to survive the winter and reproduce. Sexual selection is a form of natural selection where organisms compete for mates, fertilization, and overall reproduction. This process is for organisms to find a mate with the best, most advantageous traits to reproduce and pass down for future generations. One example of sexual selection is male competition. This competition is between males to find a mate. One type of this competition is direct combat, like how male deers with antlers battle each other to assert dominance and impress the females. The deer on the right has won against the other male and has impressed a female for reproduction. Plasticity is the ability to change an organism's physical appearance or phenotype to better fit its environmental conditions. This is an adaptive advantage because plasticity can increase survival for an organism, which then can reproduce fertile offspring with the same advantage. Organisms can change the color of their fur due to the weather in their environment. The Arctic fox can change their fur color. This helps the foxes camouflage and survive due to the thermal regulation. In summer, their fur turns into a dark brown color, while in the winter, their fur is white. They are a great example of plasticity because of their ability to change their fur color due to the environment. Another example of plasticity is buttercup leaves. These leaves use the process of heterophyly to produce different sizes of leaves to respond to their environment. The terrestrial leaves are bigger and the aquatic are smaller. Artificial selection is the process by which humans select different organisms for their desirable traits to reproduce a brand new organism for a particular outcome in future generations. This is different when compared to natural selection, where nature and the environment help the best fit organisms survive, reproduce, and pass down their traits to future generations. One example of artificial selection is dog breeds. Humans have selected different traits from existing breeds for a specific advantage. Border collies have been bred for herding animals like sheep on a farm. Huskies have been bred for strength and agility to pull sleds in the Arctic. Doodles have been bred with other purebred dogs for the advantage trait to not shed fur. For example, a golden doodle. There are around 399 dog breeds in the world where they are all artificially selected for their desirable traits. Reproductive isolation is a mechanism that stops organisms from different species from fully reproducing. The mechanism to prevent fertilization from occurring is a prezygotic barrier. One specific example of a prezygotic barrier is temporal isolation. This barrier happens when the two species mate or are fertile at different times of the year. Because of this, the organisms have different timing for reproduction, which leads to no reproduction between the two. An example of temporary isolation are frog species. Two species of frogs could mate at different times of the year, which prevents them from reproducing with one another. Genotypes are the set of genes that an organism has. Phenotypes are the observable traits that are due to the genetic code, like eye color, height, hair color, etc., that change over generations. Regarding selection, the phenotypes are acted upon rather than genotypes. Genetic code cannot be physically seen, so phenotypes are used for natural selection. This is because phenotypes are observable and can determine if an organism is fit for its environment. One example of phenotypic evolution is monogenic and polygenic traits, where monogenic traits are determined by one gene and polygenic needs multiple genes to determine a trait. One monogenic trait is polydactylism, which is a condition where cats have an extra toe. This is displayed on a discontinuous graph because you can either have one extra toe or not. There is no in between. One polygenic trait is giraffe height or neck length because there are many different genes that determine the range of neck lengths. This is displayed on a continuous graph because there are multiple traits that determine the lengths. Speciation is a process where one species separates into two or more species where they develop to become different from one another, where they can no longer breed with one another. Speciation has the ability to create different species from one original species. One example is allopatric speciation, where a physical barrier separates one species into two that evolve and become two different species. Over time, species adapt to their environments accordingly to increase their survival and reproduction rate. Some species are similar and close to the phylogenetic tree but end up developing different characteristics. This is called divergent evolution. Convergence or convergent evolution occurs when two species are distant in the phylogenetic tree, meaning they are not related, but because of the environment, they evolve similar traits and can look similar because of it.